as long as I saw my mum go through a lot of abuse as well. My granddad was a file and had abused her. There were things going on as a child where I would be going, that's not right. My late teens, early 20s, where I copied a lot of my mum's behaviour because it would make people feel sorry for me. This sounds really, really weird. The message to me from all of the adults around me, apart from one aunt, was to look after my mum. But I was 6 years old. What did I do? I went off, put the radio on and danced to Stevie Wonder. So, maybe it is the escape. Maybe that's where that all comes from.
Welcome back to Inspired By. Now, today's guest is someone that I've had the pleasure of working with for quite a few years. She's someone I love to call a really good friend and someone who I've mentored for quite a bit of time. Now, she is a vocal expert. She is an artist development coach, and she's had a #1 best-selling album. Yes, it's the one and only Carrie Griffiths. Welcome, Carrie.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very excited.
It's so good to have you here. I feel like we've been talking about this for ages.
Yeah, we have, and we've been talking for many years anyway. So it's just another conversation, isn't it?
Let's just chuck a camera on it and let's go for it. Now, I find it quite funny because we're here today on Inspired By, and one of my jobs with here, being on the show, is to speak a lot. And actually, I find it a bit intimidating being around a vocal coach, trying to speak and project my voice.
Everyone says that, but there's no need. I'm not analysing all the time. Sometimes it comes in and I'm like, no, just enjoy it. Just enjoy it. But that happens a lot. But our voices represent us, and it can be intimidating. But when I'm around other voice coaches, then I feel a little bit intimidated as well. So it's just, it's just a step, isn't it?
It's just part of the fun.
Exactly.
Now, one of the fun things I love that whenever I'm speaking at events or you're speaking at events and we're together, I always find it quite funny because you're always like, Chloë, have a bit of drink of water. Your voice has gone a bit dry. But the thing I love about you, Carrie, which I'm so glad to have you on the show, is that you are just super bubbly, super chatty. Anyone that's seen you at our events or at any event, really, you're always bouncing up and down, having a laugh. So you come across as a very confident, bubbly person. Yeah. Have you always been like that?
I've always been confident in my own abilities, but in terms of speaking to other people, I was always very, very shy. I was really quite painfully shy. And I'm a voice coach now. I've been a singer for 24 years. I've done all the stuff. I've been on international stages. I've performed to thousands and thousands of people, up to 30,000 people. I've done thousands of gigs as a singer, but I also did thousands of gigs as a dancer. I started as a dancer, and every time I tell this story when I'm talking to anyone, whether it's my students, my clients, anyone, is I kind of forget how shy I was until I think about it. But I was really quite painfully shy. And although I loved dancing, I was always a good performer. Anyone who sees me now, actually on stages where I come alive, I'm not even as bubbly in life as I am on stage. But speaking to people was very, very difficult. I always felt like I said the wrong things. People used to call me a show-off. I was always kind of, I think, maybe politically minded. And I used to play devil's advocate a lot, but I didn't realise that I was isolating other people and isolating myself. And so when I started to realise that people don't really like that's not a comfortable conversation, I didn't know what else to do. So I just stopped talking for a really long time and just let my performing do the work. And so to learn how to speak to people, I went to college and I did drama. I actually did theatre studies at college. And one of my very best friends, Alicia, she was really good at networking. She was a great actress. And we went to loads of clubs, parties, gigs, and we were kind of inseparable for the whole time we were in college. And I just watched her and I just looked at the way that she conversed with people, saw that she asked very interesting questions and really was interested in other people. And so that's how I started to learn how to talk to people. But it took a really long time.
Wow. Yeah. I find that so hard to believe now when I see the way you chat and connect and you just come across so confident. Now, I want to talk about the difference between performing on stage singing versus performing on stage speaking, because, I find it fascinating. For a tiny bit of background, I know, Carrie, you know this, but my first experience on stage as a kid were actually singing as well. And I had stage fright from a very young age, froze, I think I was about 10 years old, lead of a play, completely froze, forgot my words, stage fright kicks in, and I've never been able to do it since. Love singing, but for me, speaking was so much easier because no one knew what I was supposed to say.
Yeah.
Like I could get it totally wrong and no one had a clue because I was just like, I'm just going to bring it back on track now and carry on what I'm doing. Whereas I find for singing, for me, was harder because I had like lines to remember. If you miss the beat, you miss the bit to come in. You're like, oh God, how do I get back from here? So, but I can also see the other side of it, that a lot of people like performing because they are essentially, they can be whatever they want. How did that show up for you?
That's a really good question because, as I said earlier, and I always say, I come alive when I'm on stage. It's really strange. I don't really feel like life is real life for me. It's that, to me, feels like the performance. And for me, being on stage is that, I'm even getting emotional talking about it. For me, being on stage is my reality. I don't really know how to explain it. And for people who aren't performers, or for people who find it difficult to perform, I can really understand how that might make me feel a little bit unreal or a little bit fake. But actually, I find it very difficult to function in the real world. I think that's probably the first time I've said that out loud.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I love that you've shared that so vulnerably, because for many people, performing is a really fun thing, obviously.
Yeah.
But I've heard so many celebrities, so many actresses, so many actors who say that actually performing has helped them cope through difficult things. They've had tough times at home and they almost escape by performing. So is that sort of where you find it as well, is that you can just be whoever you want in this arena?
Yeah, possibly, and it might stem back to not feeling a bit misunderstood in my real life, because on stage your job is to make people feel good. That is your job, and if I'm not able to do that in real life, but I'm able to do that on stage, then that's something that I've achieved, and and help people to have a good night. My end goal is just for people to have a good time, and because that's my end goal. And so, my job is to just help people to feel good. And I don't know, sometimes I guess it was escaping, but for me, it actually just feels more real.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And you mentioned there the need to want to make people feel good.
Yeah.
Where did that come from for you?
Oh, wow. So maybe trigger warning. Probably because of my mum. My mum and dad split up when I was 6, and my mum was always depressed. She was always suicidal. And one of my first memories is of my mum being in hospital, having tried to take her own life. And when my dad left, the message to me from all of the adults around me, apart from one aunt, was to look after my mum. But I was 6 years old, and my mum was pregnant as well. My dad left when my mum was pregnant and I was 6. And so, there were times, I have a very, very vivid memory that I've had to work through a lot in the past few years, of my mum being very heavily pregnant on the floor crying. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do. What can I do? What did I do? I went off, put the radio on and danced to Stevie Wonder. So, maybe it is the escape. Maybe that's where that all comes from.
Or maybe even the distraction. Like, you showed that you could light up the room, because we can't always control things. And I really resonate with that story of you being 6 years old, because that's a lot of a burden for a 6-year-old to carry. Whether your mum was pregnant or not, you're not responsible for your parents. And I personally experienced that as well, where we almost like swap roles, where the child becomes the parent and the parent is now the child, especially psychologically, or we feel like we need to look after our parents. And maybe in that time, would you say that you felt like that was your way of cheering her up? Because you couldn't control anything else. You couldn't control the situation. You can't control her.
Yeah, probably. And my mum was a singer as well. Her dad was a singer, and the whole family were into music. And it was one of the things that we always did all the time. Even my dad was a guitarist, and he sang a bit as well, but he was a songwriter. But we were all into music. And another a nice memory, another very early memory I have is at my aunt's wedding. And I had one of these, it was probably 1980 or something like that. And I had one of these dresses where you spin round and it comes up, right? So I was, I think probably the adults hadn't had enough drinks or something yet, but I was the only one dancing. And so every time I did a spin, I got this round of applause and I was like, this is great. So, but I'm saying this thinking back, I just wanted to see my dress come up, And then someone gave me 50p and I was like, you can get paid for this as well. That's amazing. And I think that's probably where the entrepreneurial side of it started as a dancer. But I think, probably making my mum happy, but also it was a way that we bonded as a family. So, of an evening, my mum's got 5 brothers and sisters. She's the eldest of 6, and all of their friends would come. It was a very, very lively house. So she had her 2 brothers would come over, and they were Cockneys, and they would make up all these scenes, and we'd pretend to be on EastEnders and that kind of stuff. And they'd bring all their friends over, and we'd all do music, and they would sing, and I would dance, or sometimes I would join in with the singing. And it's just something that's always been there. Although I didn't know at that time. I thought I was actually going to be a paramedic. I don't know where that came from.
Wow.
But yeah, I think, it's all entertaining is just something that's in our family.
And I've known you for years and I've never known that. So that's why I love running the show, because I find it fascinating, Carrie, that it's almost like, have you ever had it where you're like, that was destiny, or that was destined for you? It's like you were surrounded by creativity, innovation, that energy, that imagination. And it obviously comes through now with what you're doing. So tell me how you then transitioned from dancer, Carrie, to singer, songwriter, performer.
Oh, yeah.
Someone selling albums.
Sounds good when you say it like that. Is that my life? Yeah, it is. That's pretty cool. How did that happen? Well, I went to boarding school, and we didn't have dance classes or anything like that, or even drama at boarding school. But what we did have, we lived in little houses of like 50 kids at a time, and we'd have, like, they called them house parents and house carers. And I always danced. Now, any of my school friends who, if any of them are watching this, they'll remember that I was always dancing. We had a separate dining hall. I was a weird child. And I would, when we would go to tea. So tea started at about 5 o'clock in the evening, and it probably went on till about 7 by the time everyone in the school was fed. And I would spend that whole time on the dining hall steps singing and dancing. But I only sang because I didn't have the music. So I wasn't interested in singing, I was interested in the dancing. So I always danced. I would make up dances with my friends. I'd be like, I'm the one in the middle, and I would do all the choreography, like, no, you spin round that way, and then you spin round that way, and I'm going to do all that kind of stuff. Before that, at home, I would get my toys, and I'd pretend to be Madonna, Michael Jackson, Paula Abdul, Janet Jackson, all of those, Jermaine Stewart, and I'd get all my toys and I'd line them up, and they'd be my audience, and I'd make up these shows, right? And I did that the whole of my childhood till I was like 16. Then at 16, I left boarding school, kind of had to become an adult then, and moved out to Torquay very randomly, and lived there for a year, had no friends. It was just me and my mum and my stepdad, and we were building this business that didn't really work. But I had no friends, so I had to start all over again. But I didn't know how to talk to anyone, right? So in those days, you could go out clubbing under 18. So I was only 16. So I would just go out clubbing and dance, and then people would come to me because, oh, you're a good dancer and blah, blah, blah. And then I would make friends that way. Anyway, long story, trying to cut it a bit short. Came back to London, started dance classes, couldn't follow dance classes because I'd always been the choreographer or a freestyler. So they'd be going that way, I'd be going that way, their hands up, their right hands up, my left hand would be up. Didn't work. So I couldn't be a dancer. So I just didn't really know what to do for years, and I fell into going to gigs. I'd always loved music, as I've said, and I was into punk, and I was into grunge, and I was into rock and metal. So I fell into going to gigs, and I must have gone to 3 or 4 gigs a week for about 5 years, and then I started dating a guitarist, and he told me that I should sing, and I was like, I want to dance. But by then I was like 21. It was too late. Anyway, that didn't happen. Got married, And my husband at the time, he bought me singing lessons for Christmas. No clue whether it was because I was a good singer or a terrible singer, but he bought me singing. He doesn't even remember, apparently. Bought me singing lessons, and that was it. I was just like, this is what I want to do. And Taya came along, my daughter came along, and she was about 4 months old when the relationship had already been abusive, not majorly, but enough for me to know that this wasn't right. And about 6 months in, it was going really, really badly. I wasn't allowed my own money. Everything I did was wrong. It was that kind of emotional abuse, really. And I read a book that I've never found again, but it was called Change Your Life in 7 Days. And it said, decide on the one thing that you want to do. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, I just want to sing. And the next week I moved back to London, and the rest is history. I started building my singing career from there.
Now, I just wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to share a quick message with you. Now, I've been hosting these interviews with Inspired by Show for a while now, and I've been loving all of the great feedback from our listeners. And it really means a lot when you all share from listening to these episodes, watching these episodes, share your incredible feedback. And I love that you love it as much as we do. Now, my mission for the Inspired by Show is to inspire others to challenge the norm, share their story, knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable and, shock horror, take the mask off and be raw and real. So I have a favour to ask. Can you help me on this mission by sharing this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this message? Maybe there's a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know that would really benefit from hearing this inspiring story. If you could do that to help us, help even more people to challenge the norm and push themselves out of their own comfort zone, then I'd really appreciate it. So if you haven't already, share this episode with a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know would benefit. Now, back to the episode.
Wow. Yeah.
And you talked about Taya there. I know, obviously, know Taya very well now. She is how old now?
22 now.
There you go.
Yeah.
So this just puts it in perspective of terms of time. And I'm going to definitely talk about that later on because I want to deep dive into there. But you touched on there the relationship with your ex-husband now, your husband back then, and his ways in your relationship. And for full context, you talk very openly. You've recently done a few gigs for Women's Refuge and raised money to stop abuse and help women who are going through it. So tell me a little bit more about how that played out in your life.
Whoa. Okay. I'm going to try and keep it a little bit short, but relevant. I've been in quite a few abusive relationships, abusive in different ways, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse. And I was very lucky to have been in a narcissistic relationship as well. And of all of them, the narcissistic relationship is the worst because it just kind of turns you into a different person. So yeah, a few different abusive relationships, and they all have similar cycles. They all start off great. Otherwise, you wouldn't start a relationship with a horrible person, hopefully, They all start off really, really well. That's the love bombing phase. And they're really clever. They get to know all of this stuff about you. You can tell me anything. We're soulmates. And people look at you and like, oh, you're so in love. It's such an amazing relationship. And so you open up and they get to know your vulnerabilities. And then once you're in their grip, they start to play on them. But by that time, you've invested and you're trying to get that person back that you fell in love with. But, for me, I always felt like, and maybe, again, it stems back to wanting to make people happy. I always believe in giving people second chances. I'm getting to the point now where I'm like, you maybe should stop at the second and not go to the fifth.
You're like, something doesn't seem right here.
Yeah. Maybe not 5 chances, maybe just a second chance. I've always believed in giving someone a second chance. I've always believed that people are doing the best that they can do at that time. And the people don't really mean to be mean, but over the past few years, I've started to understand actually some people just like being mean. And so it's been a really, really long journey. I'm 47 now, and it's only in the past year and a half, really, that I've started to really understand how I can move through life without attracting abusive people. And it has been a case of understanding that that's what I attract for whatever reason.
That was actually something I was going to ask you about, because I opened up very openly to you a little while ago about a type of abusive relationship I was involved in, not physical abuse, thank God, and it wasn't a romantic relationship. It was a different type of relationship, and I had no idea that it was even the case, and it was to do with narcissism. And it was only when I opened up to you to talk about it, you said, Chloë, that's not right, and you really helped me understand it. And one of the things you've always said to me is that, unfortunately, when you've been in one situation of abuse, and by the way, for full transparency, this could be physical, emotional, sexual, like you mentioned, we do actually then attract more of it.
Yeah.
What experience have you had of that?
Well, it's just, I think probably almost every relationship I've had romantically, almost romantically, and a few, and in work as well, and in music for sure. And what I've come to learn through lots of work is that it's because it's what we're familiar with. Our brains crave familiarity, whether it's good for us or very, very unhealthy. And I saw my mum go through a lot of abuse as well, and it wasn't really physical, but there were things going on as a child where I would be going, that's not right. Why are they doing that? And it was mainly, I think, probably mainly financial, but then with any type of abuse starts with emotional abuse. And there was a time in my life, probably, my late teens, early 20s, where I copied a lot of my mum's behaviour because it would make people feel sorry for me. Sounds really, really weird and a bit controlling, but it would make people feel sorry for me, and then they would become my friends. So toxic, so unhealthy. I've never really spoken about this before, but yeah, very, very unhealthy. But it took for me to start believing in myself as a singer to realize who I was and what I can bring to the world. And I think also coming across as very confident, very out there, knowing what I want, I think that attracts people who want a bit of a challenge. I'd always attract guys who say, oh, you're such a strong woman, I love it. And then, 2 years later, I'm a shell of a person, so it's very, very complex.
I find it fascinating, though, that you had the urge to understand it, because that's something that we've both bonded on and related to, is that whenever we've experienced bad things, we've gone, well, what can I learn from that? And put the mirror up and gone, well, how did I attract that? And that's a very hard thing to look at, especially like you say, because then you look back and you go, that's quite dysfunctional, that's quite toxic, but we didn't know any different. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard for that. And we will talk a little bit more about that. Now, you've also talked to me before about this whole generational piece, and that sometimes we attract these things and it's not actually our fault. So how did that play out for you, and how did you find that out?
Goodness me. I think it was just always at the back of my mind, because my mum, because of what had happened to my mum, she was very, very open about not letting people touch your body, but she didn't really talk about the other stuff. And maybe she didn't understand, maybe she didn't know herself. But it was always in the back of my mind that, trigger warning again, my granddad was a paedophile and had abused her and possibly other siblings. We don't actually really know. And I'm not sure if that became part of my identity of, that's what I come from, because everyone wants to talk about it. It's disgusting. This is disgusting. It's disgusting. Oh, the pedo this, pedo that. And say it as it just comes out. People, pedo. But then when you say, actually, that's part of my family history, people don't want to know. You shouldn't say that. And I'm like, you've just been talking about pedos for the past half an hour. Why shouldn't I talk about it? Why? What is it? It's because it's so close, and it's such a foreign thing, just such a vile thing that most people in the world are never going to do, but a lot of people experience. And it's, even though we've had Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris, all of that U-Tree business, people still don't really talk about it. I think I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but I think that, coming back to generational, I think that's, I don't want to say it's ingrained. A lot of people say, it's ingrained. Well, that means we're never going to stop the cycle. And that's a very dangerous thing. So how ingrained is it? I think it just became part of my identity, but now I want to talk about it because it doesn't have to be. And it doesn't have to be anyone else's. People say they were abused and they're never going to get over it. You know, I've been sexually abused. I've gotten over it. It's there. It was difficult. It was horrible, but it's not going to mar the rest of my life. I'm not going to let that person ruin the rest of my life. How dare they? No.
Wow. It's so inspiring when you talk about it. Honestly, I get shivers every time, because I just think this is what needs to be talked about. And I know you did say, yeah, you went off on a tangent, but that's a beautiful tangent to get to, because for me, I see people all the time. And I'm so fortunate to speak to people like yourself and loads of other incredible, inspiring people. And everyone's got this story. And it's almost like, almost a shame that comes with it. Yeah. It's like, the bigger my brand, I can't talk about that sort of stuff. I can't talk about that. Or worse, my dad did that, my granddad did that, and that then defines me. And that's not true, because we can break the cycle. We can actually say, do you know what? That is what they did, and I'm going to draw a line under it.
Yeah.
I think the challenge for a lot of people, Carrie, is how to notice it. Because for some people, like for example, for me, when I was connected with a few different narcissistic people, I had no idea. Yeah. And I find that there's one piece of awareness, and then there's doing something about it. For you, you've obviously experienced it a few times. In the most recent time, clearly that was what broke the pattern. Yeah. What happened for you to then say, do you know what? Excuse my language, but fuck it, I'm not putting up with this anymore. What was that breaking point for you?
I was just tired of talking about it, tired of having shit relationships, tired of telling myself off for doing it again. Then I saw it creeping into Taya's life, and I was like, fuck this. This is not happening. Wow. So not badly, not badly. There was just a few things that were happening for her, and I was like, no. This. We've got to break this cycle. And it was really tough. I did a lot of work. But what was the main thing? I fell in love with my best friend, and it turned out to not work out very well, because we both had issues, some that he wasn't facing, some that I wasn't facing. And I just said, oh, enough. I'm nearly 50. Like, how long is this going to go on for? I just don't want it anymore. I'm just tired.
Wow. And I can feel that. And I can see how a lot of other people might be listening to this or be in the same situation, be like, do you know what? I'm tired of this and I need help. Yeah. And for you've done an incredible job of raising money for Women's Refuge, and they were a huge part of your journey. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Women's Refuge and why you're so passionate to help them now.
Well, years ago, I went to a refuge, and I lived there for 6 months, because I'd actually split from the abuser in that situation, but he kept following me around. And I was watching a morning program, and they were talking about it, and I was like, oh my God, they're talking about my entire life. And I went and I called them that morning. I said to my boss, this is happening. And my boss knew, because this guy kept coming to my workplaces. They kept moving me, and he kept coming. And I said, look, this is what's happening. You see it. Here he is. He'd probably come later on today. I said, I've got to get away. So, and I was staying at my mum's, and he would, anyway, all this stuff was going on. And I just called them, and I just said, I need help. And the next day they came and met me, and I lived there for 6 months. And that was, when I say tough, it was easier living in an abusive relationship than it was living in a refuge. And that's not because Refuge is doing anything bad. It's because you've finally faced up to what's happening. There are all these other women, children living in, I can't talk about it. You're not allowed to talk about it too much. And actually it's people's lives as well. But, it's not an easy, they're not luxury houses. Let's put it that way. They do their best, but you're just every day faced with, this is what I need to deal with now. This is what I need to sort out. And they helped me in a massive way. It was a space to clear my head. I still went to work. I was getting some counselling. And it was just a space to clear my head and just figure out, what do I want and what am I going to do next? And what did I do next? Got into another bloody abusive relationship. But it was a different type of abuse. I didn't know. So you do all of this stuff, and like, it's so ingrained for me by that point is that I was like, well, he's not hitting me, but that's not the point. It's but why Refuge? Well, they helped me, and I've always believed in giving back. My singing teacher Mary, I was still having singing lessons with Mary at this point, and she knew a little bit about what was going on. And there were times when I wasn't even able to pay for my singing lessons, which was like the most important thing in my life at that point, because I was paying rent at the Refuge and rent somewhere else, so I didn't have the money. And she said to me, Carrie, when I was learning to sing and when I was starting my career, someone helped me, and I've always believed in paying it forward, and so I'm going to help you as long as when your turn comes around, you do the same thing. And so one of the things that I think about every time I pay it forward in whatever way it is, even buying a coffee for a homeless person, this is what Mary did for me, so it's my turn.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing when we just come across people that are just so giving?
Yeah.
And you're going to get me going now, but when you've had such a shit show, to be honest, like you've had such a shit deck constantly, and you're like, come on, when is the good stuff going to come? And people think the good stuff comes in a big paycheck or a great job or a great client or a windfall, and actually it can be the smallest act of kindness that makes the difference.
But it's also about taking ownership for the shit that's happened, because we make choices. When you get to a certain age, when I got to 30, I was like, I can't blame my mum's situation anymore. I can't blame my granddad. I can't blame my dad. I can't blame anyone else. It's time for me to take responsibility, and it's taken until now. So this is like 17 years in now, But yeah, it is, as you say, it's the small things, because we can all do big gestures. That's really easy, but it's the thoughtful things that make the difference.
Yeah. And one of the things I love, Carrie, with what you've done is you've got this immense story. Like, I love that you're giving us the opportunity to hear it, and I'm really grateful for you opening up, because I think there are so many people that need to hear this. That's why this platform exists. But I've heard you talk about it on stage. You've ran concerts where you combine your singing with this story, and you share so openly about things that have happened. And you shared recently a gig that you did for Refuge where I was there, and I was like, yes, Carrie. It was just the most beautiful thing. And you shared openly for the first time one of the big things that happened with your granddad and your grandmother. If you're open to sharing here, I think some people need to hear the stories, but also the way you've, like we said, broken that chain or that impact.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, my granddad was a paedophile, certainly abused my mum, possibly other siblings. We don't know who else, no idea. And he had come from Trinidad and had another family there, so possibly that was the history. I don't know. It's all speculation. But he was a singer. He was a great entertainer. He travelled all around the UK and other countries, and was a loved guy. And when he died, he had, God, there's so many trigger warnings to this story. But when he died, he'd actually committed suicide. I don't think I shared that in the most recent gig, but he'd committed suicide, and the police had come round to tell my grandmother that they'd found his body. He jumped off a bridge, actually close to this studio, and they'd found his body, and it was the middle of the night, and my mum was 13 at the time, and she got up to let the police in because my nan didn't get out of bed. And what they discovered was that before he'd committed suicide, he'd actually murdered my nan, and my mum found her, and with the police, and she'd been murdered. Now there's another part to this story. One of my aunts could have also been murdered, But she fortunately lived in another house at the time. She lived with her grandmother, so my great-grandmother, and had been invited to come and spend the night, and she didn't. So she's now still alive, thankfully. So it could have been a double murder, but this, it's really difficult to share, even though this is like the third or fourth time that I've shared it in my entire life, right? Publicly. But, domestic abuse, domestic violence is the biggest killer of women in the UK. Not heart disease, not cancer, domestic violence. And it's not talked about nearly enough. And every time there's going to be someone in the comments saying it happens to men too, we know. We're not negating the fact that it happens to all genders. The fact is, whether you want to believe it or not, male on female abuse is the biggest killer of women in the UK, possibly many, many other places. And it's got to be addressed. It's got to be addressed. Who knows if my nan knew that was going to happen to her? My aunt thinks that she kind of had an idea that it was going to happen to her, but who knows if my nan thought that? I don't know. And how many other women, how many women that we've met, how many women that are going through it, And I've got friends who know my history, and they say, well, it's their own fault, they go back. But you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know what's going on for that person. It's such a complex, it's like drug addiction. It's such a complex situation. But it's got to be addressed now. And that's the reason that I'm so passionate about Refuge. They helped me. And they weren't around when my nan was murdered. They started in the 70s. They weren't around, and it started with one person opening her house to one woman. And now it's a huge charity. So.
Oh, I got goosebumps there where you shared that. And I've said to you before, and I'll say it publicly here, I'm so up for helping in whatever way I can with you, because I am very lucky that it's never happened to me. But every time I hear stories like this, like I'm sure we've talked about this before, but my blood boils because I get so furious hearing that people are in these situations because they don't know a way out.
Yeah, exactly.
They feel trapped. And I know you've got personal experience of that, but you've seen it in your family as well. And for me, I think it's important that people who are listening, watching, or passing this on to people is you're never trapped. I know you feel like that, and you might be trapped by choice, like we spoke about. You might not know another way out, but there's always another option. We just don't often see it.
Yeah. What
What advice would you give to someone that's maybe listening or watching, that's maybe had this experience and feeling like that right now?
Tell someone. It's really difficult to talk about. It's really difficult to admit. You're going to feel ashamed. You're going to feel guilty. There are people who are going to judge you, but it's okay. Tell somebody, because even if at the time that you tell them you don't feel particularly supported, at some point you will. It took for me to watch a TV show, and my best friend for years had been telling me to get out, stop dating these guys, stop doing this. That's not what it's about. It's about feeling heard, knowing that you've got somewhere to turn to, and knowing that there eventually is somewhere that's safe. So just tell somebody.
You mentioned they're your best friends.
Yeah.
Telling you. And the reason I want to mention this and ask this question is because I think it's also very hard for people who are surrounded, let's say you're my best friend and I love you so much. I'm like, Carrie, what are you doing? It's so hard to be the onlooker and saying things like that, but not knowing what you can say, what to do. What would you say to someone who's a friend of someone who's in that situation?
Listen. It is very easy to judge. It's very easy to give advice, but just listen. And sometimes they just need to let off steam and have a hug. They don't necessarily need to leave the relationship at that point. Just listen and ask them, how can I help? If you want to help, because it's also quite a big thing to take on. If you want to help, there have been so many people in the past who said, I'm here whenever you need me. And then I'm like, I need you to help me get my stuff out of the flat. They're like, sorry, I can't. Like, well, you're not here then, are you?
Yeah.
So, but be realistic about what you can do, even if it's just going for a cup of tea,
Yeah. We have this thing, myself and Cedric, my partner, as you know, where it's like, do you want my brain or do you want my shoulder? And the phrase I always ask, and he asked me as well, it's like, I come to talk and he's like, do you want an answer, a solution, or do you want a cuddle? Because we don't always want the same thing, right? You can come and be like, "Rah," and then that person goes and gives you solutions. I'm like, I don't want solutions right now. I just want to be dysfunctionally annoyed. Like, that's just where I'm at right now. And I just want to rant it out.
Yeah.
And other times we are like in tears and going, I just need help. Like, help me. And I do think it's important to ask permission before just giving advice, because you don't know whether that person's ready yet. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is, because I'm so grateful you've opened up, and I think it's so interesting what you're sharing. Where do you think forgiveness plays a part in this?
So huge, especially forgiving yourself. That's the thing that was the most difficult. I've forgiven everyone who's abused me, everyone. It took a really, really, really long time. You know, it took me 10 years to get over one relationship, 7 years to get over another. I didn't even meet my granddad. He died in 1969. I was born in 1976. I forgave him probably about 5 years ago. But forgiving myself, literally just done it last year with a lot of work. And I mean, when I say break down tears I've never even imagined, because you finally start to really love yourself. And I really don't want to say this in a mean way. I mean it with all the love in the world. Most people don't love themselves. Most people are just doing what it takes to get through. And and I understand that's a very big thing for me to say, but the reason I know that is because the conversations that I have with people and what I see people doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. And I actually would say it's so much easier to love somebody else than it is to love yourself.
So much easier. So much easier. It's because it's easy to give advice, it's easy to give support, but when it's you and sometimes you just don't even know what you need. There's been times I'm like, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I need. So for me, it's easier just go and sing, right? And it solves everything. But, then you stop singing and it comes back to real life. But yeah, really, really taking on that time to know that it's going to be difficult, keep working through it, and there are going to be times when you're like, I just want to go and drink all the whiskey in the world, or, whatever is your thing, go shopping, work too much, go on holiday and forget everything, whatever your thing is. But if you really, really want to get through and you want to stop your cycle, first of all, you can't stop any other cycle before stop your own. Stop your cycle and really undo those unhealthy patterns and start new ones. You've just got to go through it and understand that loving yourself is the most difficult but the most liberating thing you can ever do.
I find it so fascinating, Carrie, because you've talked so much about the raw and real shit, which is why this show exists. And I'm so grateful you're talking about it, as I mentioned. And I love that you're now on the other side. So for anyone who is watching and is still in the raw and real, what's it like on the other side?
Oh, God. It's like dancing. It's like doing somersaults and what are they called now?
Cartwheels?
Cartwheels. It's like doing cartwheels inside all the time. Yeah.
And how's that showing up now for you? Obviously, you're back in your singing world.
Yeah.
Which, for anyone listening, there was a bit of a pause there, which you went through your own personal journey. Yeah. What's it like now with your singing? How is that playing out? Tell us more.
Oh God, it's so exciting. So back on stage, when I gave up singing in performing, I didn't give up singing. When I gave up performing in 2017, I was like, that's it, that's me. I'm just going to help other people. I've done everything I want to do. Blah 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 blah. But no, that's where I belong. On stage is where I belong. Back on stage, man, and writing again. I stopped writing in about 2014. So it's been a really, really, really long time. And it's been a long time, but it's just getting those creative juices flowing and, knowing that you're going to make some mistakes and that's why it's part of the process. Yeah.
Oh, question, totally random. I've done this with quite a few different guests. I love it. What's your favourite song to sing?
Oh God, it depends on the day. My favourite song to sing, it's going to be, probably Overjoyed by Stevie Wonder.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't give any warning, and I don't think you've done a warm-up of your voice.
Oh, no, I haven't.
I don't suppose there's any chance we can get a line of any song that you would love to sing.
Yeah, okay. Let's do, as I've mentioned it, let's do Don't You Worry About a Thing. It's all going to be okay. Don't you worry about a thing. No. Don't you worry about a thing, baby, 'cause I'll be standing on the side when you check it out.
Oh, love it. Thank you so much, Kat. I kid you not, we did not talk about that before.
No.
She's like, Chloë, you didn't give me any notice at all.
I had 3 beers last night.
And we love it anyway.
Yeah.
Carrie, I find it fascinating talking to you about this. Now, obviously, you have been on stages, like you said, like today we've been inspired by you with your stages. You've spoken in front of thousands of people, loads of different countries. You've toured everywhere. And I know you're going to be planning on your next tour very, very soon.
Yeah.
Who would you say has inspired you the most on the journey? Is there anyone that you've met or you've come across, a celebrity or you've heard of, a singer maybe, that's been inspiring to you on your journey?
Well, it's not a singer. It's actually you.
I wasn't ready for that you just caught me off guard, because I normally ask why, but that's really weird. But in what way, I guess, is my question, because I'm a little bit caught up by that.
In what way? It's your support, your tenacity, your let's just do it. You know, all of that stuff that I've done is like that you've done in so many different ways than I have, but very, very, you know, and really it boils down to the same thing. It's just get out there and do it.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. And it's amazing because it's funny because you've always said that I've been part of your journey, but also seeing you grow has been part of my journey, because it's just like, wow, every time I mentored you, it helped me believe in myself. And every time I mentored you, it helped you believe in you. So it's just been that constant give and take. It's just been incredible. And for me, Carrie, I've loved seeing you flourish and go on the journey. And for everyone going on a journey, it's never just fucking sunshine and roses. It's like we think we take a step forward and then suddenly it's like, oh, actually that's a crack in the road and I need to go down a deep dark hole to come back out, for whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah.
Now, question for you, Carrie. We have a tradition on the show where we talk more about inspiring stories. Now, obviously today you've shared your inspiring story, which has been amazing, and I'm so excited with what's coming up next. Now, my question for you is, who do you know that you believe has an inspiring story that we should hear next?
My friend Garry Bushell.
Oh, yeah. And tell us about Garry.
So Garry is, what does he do now? He's a TV journalist, music journalist, he must write about 4 or 5 books a year. He's amazing. And he writes books about his experiences with the music industry. And he was there, right, you know, as you know, I love punk. I've been a punk since the age of 7. And he was there right in the beginning, writing about punk bands. And he actually termed the term Oi, which is a subculture of punk. And so, yeah, he invented the word Oi. He named Oi what it is. Oi is a type of music that I absolutely love. And he's a guy that likes to push people's buttons, shall we say. But he's got a great story, and he's got lots of really, really interesting stories about things he's done in his life.
Oh, well, yeah. I would love to hear more.
And he's a massive supporter of women as well.
Oh, yes, more of that then. Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much, Carrie. And again, I've said it a few times, but thank you for sharing so vulnerably here. I think you're an inspiration to so many people going through, whether it's you're born into a situation that you had no control over, or your personal situation that you've gone through, forgiving people, and then also coming out the other end is just amazing. And I'm so excited to see what's coming next.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
It's been really fun. It's been great to have you here. Thank you so much, Carrie. Well, I hope you guys have all enjoyed that as much as I have. What an inspiring story. And obviously, if you are interested in following Carrie's journey, maybe her new best-selling album that I'm sure will be doing very, very well, or her next tour, do make sure you follow her. We will be putting her information in the notes below. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you are sharing in the comments what has been the most inspiring thing that you have heard on this episode. And if you are watching or listening on any of the other platforms, if you haven't already, what are you doing? Make sure you subscribe to the show so you don't miss our next inspiring guest. That's all for now. Hope to see you soon. See you next week with our next guest.